Bruchim Abayim, welcome to Kolel Ahavat Israel here in La Jolla, San Diego. It's Tisha B'Av today and we have a special class. Kamtza Bar Kamtza is the story of the beginning of the destruction of the Second Temple. Khorban Beit Sheni, Kamtza Bar Kamtza, Masechet Gitin. We're going to, Be'ezat Hashem, as usual, first and foremost, we're going to dedicate this class to our sponsors and to people that need refuah shlema be'ezat Hashem. We want to do to Bernie and Zehavit Baruch refuah shlema, to Bernie Chai Baruch Chai ben Chaya Miriam וZehavit Batova be'ezat Hashem refuah shlema, to Ephraim ben Devorah, our sponsor, Dr. Kahana and his wife, and also a big thank to Daniel Mog and his wife from the company Need for Build. We thank you for your sponsorship and maintaining Torah and allowing us to bring a couple other rabbis, Be'ezat Hashem. We're growing the kollel, so we thank you all, our sponsor. If you want to become a sponsor, please contact us. We'll be very honored and humbled by your support. Refuah shlema to Flori bat Rachel, Anat bat Zizel, Ta'ir bat Yafa, Ilanit bat Rivka, Chaim ben Remond, Yaakov ben Genia, Yaniv Meir ben Chana Anet, Mordechai ben Esther, Einav bat Sarah, Binyamin ben Natan, Rachel Ifrach, Nachman ben Ruth, Baruch Hashem is feeling much better, Violeta Badora, Michal Bat Ruchama. Anybody else? Refuah shlema?
Pinchas ben Sarah.
Pinchas ben Sarah. יחד עם כל חולי עמך ישראל, אל נא רפנה להם, אל נא רפנה להם. להבדיל לעילוי נשמת אבי מורי ניסים בן פרחיה, אמי מורתי רחל בת רוחמה אחי, מאיר אברהם ויעקב, יוסף אהרון בן משה קהילה, בת שבע בת רבקה, גבריאל בן שרה, טובה בת יפה, ברל יוסף בן גיטל, דינה בת יוסף, and יהודה אריה בן שרה. הקדוש ברוך הוא בגן עדן יכין את נשמתם. May they reside in the heaven with the neshama be'ezat Hashem. All right, so today we have a very special class. The Gemara, we're in Masechet Gitin. They say our sages in Shulchan Aruch and in many other halacha law, you're not allowed to learn so much Torah as far as Torah that makes you happy. To learn Torah, for an example, from Parashat HaShavua or from the Nevi'im, the Tanakh, there's a lot of great, beautiful stories. Makes you happy. On Tisha B'Av, we have to do two things. We have to mourn the destruction that came upon the people of Israel. We have to pray to Hashem. And we have to ask for the Mashiach to come. Why? To rebuild the third and final temple, but to have Hashem with us. Many, many people pray for Mashiach just because they have problems. Please come, I have problem with my mortgage. יש לי בעיות בעבודה, יש לי בעיות פה, I have this problem. I want Mashiach to solve all this. I'm not feeling well. Really, the essence of Tisha B'Av is to first and foremost restore our will to want Hashem with us. Tisha B'Av is what we call Sha'at. The word Tisha has the word Sha'at. Hashem is the hour of God. You have to really, really want Hashem with you. It's not about just having the temple. Because we had temple, we destroyed it twice. It's about having Hashem with us in every level. Today we're going to start with Masechet Gitin. You're allowed to learn Masechet Gitin. Gitin in Hebrew, what's Gitin in Aramaic? Means get, divorce. This entire Masechet, what's divorce, is one of the worst things that can happen. The word Gitin comes from the word get. Get in Hebrew, להתגרש. You have, when you marry somebody, you want to chaz v'chalila break off this marriage, you have to give a get. And the get is an interesting word. You'll never find the get in the Torah. You'll not find this word anywhere in the Torah. Why? The letter get is gimel and tet, and it's the only two letters that cut the entire word of the word beyachad. Slice the word beyachad, every letter, before and after. If you take the word together, beyachad, meaning marriage, and you take the letters of get, you slice the letters of beyachad.
Amazing.
After bet you have gimel, right? Before yud you have tet. After chet you have tet. And before dalet you have gimel. You slice off the word beyachad. Hashem divorced us twice. In the destruction of the first and the second temple. But now we're going to talk about a very unique story that's called Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. You know the word Kamtza, you know what it means in Aramaic? It comes from the word kometz, kamtzan, somebody that is stingy, but also somebody that only thinks about themselves. And it's very interesting, in Kamtza in Aramaic is also a grasshopper, chagav. You know, grasshopper, the Gemara says, is the one animal.
You can eat it.
Yeah, there is some kosher. There is some kosher grasshopper. We'll talk in a minute. But if you look at the grasshopper, it looks like he's dressed up, like in a tuxedo. Right? The Gemara says, he is his dress. He is his clothing. The chagav is one animal that never care for anybody by themselves. Unlike other animals, they like to share. For an example, there is a akhbar, a mice. You know why the Haddam called him akhbar? Akhbar is one of the animals, when he finds something, let's say he found a bag of wheat. He doesn't start eating until he calls all his buddies. He goes and brings them. That's why it's called akhbar. Akhbar is me'akev et abar. He slows down growth. That's why we don't want akhbarim, right? No farmers will tell you, I want rats in my area. This Kamtza is really a story that brought upon the huge, huge destruction of our second temple. So I want to put everything in what we call time frame, people who were involved and whatnot before, in order to really understand everything. We're talking about the second temple, towards the end of the second temple. Many people think that there was only two people, Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. There was a guy named Kamtza and another guy named Bar Kamtza. Bar Kamtza means the son of Kamtza. They both are not good, make no mistake. But there is the main character that it spoke about in the beginning that you never hear about again. The Gemara says, we are in Masechet Gitin Nun Hey Amud Bet. It says that the destruction that came upon Yerushalayim, it came from several things. One, what happened between Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Charva Yerushalayim. Atarnegola v'tarnegolata, it says because of a male and female chicken, Har HaMelech, the mountain of the king destroyed, that Judea and Samaria. And because of a carriage, a female carriage that used to carry females, the side of it, discussion, destroyed the city of Beitar. But we're going to focus today on the first thing. A Kamtza, Bar Kamtza, that destroyed Yerushalayim. So you know, what happened there? We have a guy that's called Gavra. The first guy named Gavra. A person, a gever, a man. That he had a person that he likes named Kamtza. Okay? That's the second guy. There is a third guy named Bar Kamtza. That the second guy, Kamtza, hated very much. And Kamtza goes about and he throw a party, the biggest party Yerushalayim have ever seen in the second temple. The Gemara will tell us, our sages will speak about it in many different sages, from the Tanaim through the Amoraim, through later on Rishonim and Achronim. They'll say that there was one of the best and biggest party ever in Yerushalayim, inviting about 1,000 Talmidei Chachamim, rabbis, head of community, It was like a Achashverosh meal. Best meal. And this Kamtza had a servant. And he said to the servant, I want you to go and bring Kamtza. And that he loved for him to come. But the servant went and got the wrong guy named Bar Kamtza. That was his enemy number one. So remember, there's the first guy, Gavra. There is Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Kamtza is throwing a party. He asked to bring his best friend, an honorable one, but the servant bringing the wrong guy named Bar Kamtza. Now, Bar in English, we know what it is, but in Aramaic means a son. It could be that it was his own son that they were fighting with, the father and son. So goes the servant and he brings the wrong guy. Now this guy, it was not invited originally. But all of a sudden, he sees there's a carriage coming to his house. You are asked to the best party in town. Please come right away. It's already started. That's what the servant made a mistake. He went to the wrong guy. The guy says, wow, Baruch Hashem, he wants to do peace. הוא רוצה לעשות שלום. קמצא ואני בר קמצא נעשה שלום. Beautiful. He got dressed up. He goes to the party. He sits down. Now remember, there's 1,000 people there. And not just people, very, very, very righteous people. They said there was a head of Sanhedrin there. Sanhedrin, the rabbis of Yerushalayim. There was Kohanim. There was Levites. It was an amazing, amazing crowd, so to speak. And all of a sudden, the owner of this party looks around and he sees his enemy sitting there. He walks up to him, immediately grabs him, and says to him, what are you doing here? Get out of here. The guy says, what are you doing? Why are you embarrassing me? I'll pay for the meal. I'm already here sitting. Don't embarrass me. אל תעשה לי בושות עכשיו. אני אשלם לך על האוכל. He said, I'll pay for my meal. Kamtza says, no, get out of here. Start pulling him. Now everybody starts, there's a commotion. Imagine the whole hall is all of a sudden being quiet. Everybody looks around. They hear a guy yelling, the host, out of all people, yelling at a guest. The guest, Bar Kamtza says, listen, please, don't embarrass me. I'll pay for half of this meals that you're feeding people. Let's say each meal is $100. There's 1,000 people. I'll give you 500,000. Please don't embarrass me.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. The guy says, no, get out of here. Pulls him now, drags him across the hall. Everybody is looking. He says, please, I'll give you the whole money for everybody. Don't embarrass me, please. No, drags him and throw him out. This guy was so hurt, Bar Kamtza, he says, I'm going to do something here to teach everybody a lesson. It's not just about the host. It's about 1,000 rabbis sitting there and nobody saying a word. Just allowing this to happen. This is the biggest part of this whole story. When you have so many rabbis, so-called leaders, that allow such things, a chutzpah and cherpa, shame, act like this to happen and not contesting them, they're just as guilty, the Gemara says. He says to him, I will destroy these people now. He says, I'm going to go to the Caesar, to the Caesar that ruled Jerusalem at the time, and I'm going to tell him that the entire Jewish people have mutiny against him. He just doesn't know it. Mordimbo. Who was the Caesar? It was Neron, Claudius. I want to bring just a little bit about Neron. Who was Neron? Claudius. Neron Claudius, by the way, he's called Claudius. His father, adoptive father, was Claudius. Abba Mamet shelo haya Claudius. Okay? Claudius, by the way, died, and Neron became the Caesar. Neron is the guy that actually killed his mother. If you remember, he was the fifth Caesar of Rome from that family. And he killed his mother, and he burnt Rome. He was a king of Rome, a Caesar, for 13 years. Neron. Yes, Neron Claudius. And he even killed his first wife, Octavia. Okay? He married a second wife that was actually Jewish. He didn't know that. Later on, he would find out that she keeps Shabbat. And because they were married and already have children, he said, listen, she's a wonderful wife. I'm just going to keep it quiet, as we say. His second wife was named Poppaea. And she was actually what we call Anusa. She was one of those Jews that hate a religion. The Gemara said that she kept kashrut and kept Shabbat in his own palace. Now goes Bar Kamtza. The Gemara said that he went all the way to Rome. That's several thousand miles to get there, to tell the Caesar, listen, your subordinate group of the Jewish people in Jerusalem are betraying you every day. Nero says, what do you mean, really? He goes, yes. He says, how do you know? He says, I know, I just came from there. And I know you treat them well and you think they are doing peace with you, but they're not. And I'll prove it to you. So Nero says, how? He says, you know, there is a sacrifice that we bring for all the goyim. Every king used to send a sacrifice, Olah. There were 70 sacrifices were sent to the Mikdash. And he said, you'll see yours, you're going to send this sacrifice, and they will not sacrifice it. They will defy you. So, Neron says, I'm going to give them the best. The Gemara says he gave them the best egel. It was a lamb that was so fat and so perfect, ready for Korban. And he sent Bar Kamtza back to Jerusalem with his soldiers to see what happened. On the way back, Bar Kamtza caused 2 blemishes to this Korban, one in the lip and one in the eyelid. Now they brought this Korban, they check it in the Beit HaMikdash, and they see it has mum, it's not kosher. There's a problem with it. Now there is a big debate. What should we do? Now they don't know that Bar Kamtza went to him yet. Okay? They bring the Korban to the Kohanim. The Kohanim, no, we cannot sacrifice it. Not allowed, even if it comes from a king. Now they cannot say it to the king. If they say to the king, no, that means Chaz v'Chalila, they really don't listen to him. It's their king now. He owns Israel. So they decided to go to the head of the Sanhedrin, and the head of Sanhedrin was Rabbi Zechariah ben Avukales. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, he calls himself little, but he's really the head of the Sanhedrin. And he basically says we cannot either not sacrifices or sacrifices. So they said, let's kill Bar Kamtza. They found out that Bar Kamtza actually told Neron about this. And he says, no, you're not allowed to kill somebody because they bring you a bad korban from a king. So basically, now there is no sacrifice, there is no honor to the king. And the king Nero now understand that the truth is really the people of Yerushalayim do not respect him, go against him. So he goes out himself, and he comes. They sent him, the Senate of Rome sent him to go and destroy Jerusalem. The Gemara will say that because of the opinion of the so-called Rabbi Zechariah, he called himself little. Why he called himself little? Because there is halacha, if let's say you come to ask a question, several rabbis, you always go to the little one first, and then you go to the top one. If you're not satisfied, you can, right? It's known to be happening in Tzfat with Rabbi Yosef Karo, and then the Arizal above him. And we see here, he called himself Hakatan, meaning, this is my final decision, there's nobody go above. Because of his decision, the Gemara says, Be'anvanuto, because he was trying to be humble, he allowed the Caesars to come and destroy the temple. So now, the story goes as follows. Neron...
Could he have sacrificed this blemished animal?
So technically, they could, but not in the Bet HaMikdash. Bet HaMikdash only perfect, no mum. Mum in Gematria is 86. Has to be godly perfectly. Even the people that work, the Kohanim, were perfect, no blemishes. If a Kohen who had a little blemish cannot be a Kohen. Hashem says, this is the house I reside in on earth, so to speak. I want you to have a glimpse of how perfect things above. Everything has to be 100% perfect, not 99.9. Even a little blemish on the lip, on the eyelid, you cannot sacrifice. It's a good question, Yaakov. Many times, other kings used to send, and they used to trick them and sacrifice it somewhere else. But Hashem here did not let this happen. Hashem saw the horrificness of this embarrassment that Bar Kamtza's witness, and all the 1,000 tzaddikim, so to speak, Rabbanim, Sanhedrin, never said a word, basically agreeing. So everything they learned all their life means nothing. It says, Derech Eretz kadma la Torah. If you don't have Derech Eretz, you're not allowed to teach. You're not allowed to call yourself a rabbi. They say if a rabbi is not decent, forget anything else, stealing or anything like that, or cheating or hurting people. If he's not decent, the little thing, what's not being decent? You can have one thing so little, you're not decent. He's not allowed to lead a congregation.
Explain Derek Eretz, please.
Derech Eretz is behavior. First, behave properly in the way of God before you can represent God. The Gemara will tell us, and it's also in the Shulchan Aruch, in the place that there is Chilul Shabbat, you're not allowed to respect the rabbi. It's actually a mitzvah of lo ta'aseh. Here we have 1,000 rabbis, leaders, siding with one rich guy versus standing for Hashem. They say if you don't stand for the truth, for Hashem especially, in this case, you are just as worse as this guy that does it. Hashem says, look at this second Bet HaMikdash. There's so many problems. This is the Bet HaMikdash that brought so much division into the people of Israel more than anything else. The tzdukim, right? Right? The heresies. The Romans, the Greeks, Antiochus, Beitar, Bar Kokhba, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, the father of Matityahu. Many divisions. Even Hillel and Shammai was in this second temple. It says this temple, Shlomo HaMelech understood that there were so many problems that he hid 5 things from the original Bet HaMikdash that this temple will not own and have because of the problems that the people of Israel will bring upon themselves and the destruction of it. The Gemara will tell us he hid the original menorah, he hid the original ark and the kruvim, the Ner HaTamid and the Ruach HaKodesh that came. He asked us not to come to the next one. So now, come Neron, as we mentioned, he comes to Yerushalayim, and is right when he lands at the shores of Israel, he does something. He was well versed in magic, the Gemara says, and he shoots 4 arrows, 1 arrow to each direction, and all the 4 arrows, the Gemara said, turns in airs and go and land in Yerushalayim. Because he wanted to see who should he attack first, what side, north, east, west, or south. They all went to Yerushalayim. All the 4 arrows landed in Yerushalayim. He understood this is the place. The guy was right. Bar Kamtza is absolutely correct. So he comes there. When he arrives to Yerushalayim, שלחו היהודים את נירון קיסר להחריב את ירושלים. Rome sent him to destroy Jerusalem. And after he threw those 4 arrows and everything landed in Jerusalem, he says, let me see, maybe it's a coincidence. Let me see if really this is the case, if I'm here to destroy Yerushalayim or not. The Gemara will tell us that he went to the streets of Yerushalayim, he started walking, and he sees a little boy coming out of Bet Midrash. And he asked this little boy, Psok li psukecha. There is an halacha in the Gemara, and it's also a segula, that if you want to know if what you're about to do is truth, or the near future is truth, you ask a very young child, not a rabbi, Tinokot shel bet rabban, you ask them, what did you just learn? The last thing you learned in the cheder. This boy looks at him. He sees, a giant Caesar with all his, armor, and he sees soldiers around him, and he says to him, we just learned from the book of Yechezkel, an interesting verse. He looks at him and he says to him, ונתתי את נקמתי באדום ביד עמי ישראל. I just learned from the book of Ezekiel that Hashem will avenge the Edomites that's about to destroy Jerusalem in the hands of Israel. Meaning whoever comes to destroy will die. Neron looks at him. He says, the Gemara says, that Neron says to himself, Kedusha beruchu be'i lecharuve beita? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to destroy whoever is coming to destroy his house? I'm not doing this. Neron leaves Yerushalayim, escape, doesn't tell anybody, not even one soldier. He moved to a town and he converts. He's basically Arak, we call Arak in the military somebody that run away from the military. Let's say you have to be in the military every week. If you don't show up, you call Arik, right? That means you leave without permission. He left his own military, he's the head of the military, he's the head of Rome. He leaves everything behind, even his own family, and he goes and he converts and he remarries. And from him will come Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, the Zohar Kadosh says, Yaakov Avinu saw him, his neshama, when he came to meet Esav after 36 years. Yaakov Avinu ishtachave sheva pe'amim le'Esav. He bowed to Esav 7 times. By the way, that's happened on Tisha B'Av. When Yaakov Avinu bowed to Esav 7 times, the Gemara will tell us that he was actually thanking Esav for 7 tzaddikim that will come from Edom. We know one of them is at the end of this Masechta is Onkelos. Onkelos is the guy that actually was the father of Titus. Titus that will come and destroy the temple later on. Onkelos, it was, I'm sorry, not the father, it was the nephew of Titus. The sister of Titus was the mother of Onkelos. And he, as we know, he went around and asked what's the best thing to do. And everybody says invest in something that has a good future. So he says, so far I see that the Jewish people is the best investment. Let me learn the Torah. And he asked, should I? And Titus said, no, originally. And he asked two other people and said, no. But he said, no, I'm going. If Neron left, there must be truth to being Jewish. And he converted. And after he converted, Titus said to him, if you do it correctly, you'll be one of the leaders. Meaning if you do it, real tshuva, and it's true, he became the only Roman to write on every chumash, as you see those sections right on the side of the Torah, is Onkelos. He was one of the greats, like Rashi, that explained. Onkelos translated the whole Torah. He became such a Baal Tshuva. When Yaakov was bound to him. He was bound to Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes. He was bound to Shmaya and Naftalion, who came from Sancheriv. He was bound to Rabbi Akiva. He was bound to all the 7 tzaddikim that came from Edom. Continue the Gemara and says, after he left, Barach Niron Kesar ve'azal ve'iger, halach ve'itgayer, he became a Jew, and it says, the Gemara will tell us that from him will come Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes. After he escaped, the Roman put a new Caesar in place named Aspianus. And Aspicianus, the Caesar, they sent him to destroy Jerusalem now. Because you send one commander with military, the commander leaves, the military is still there. The Roman says, listen, we found out that it's truth, the Jews don't do what they're supposed to do, we have to destroy the temple. We had an agreement with them. They're not honoring the agreement, just like any other rulers, they destroy you. There's no negotiation right away. They come with one idea to destroy you. Come the Caesar Aspicianus, and he actually does a matzor. He actually 3 years surrounding the city and they cannot break in. Now, the city of Jerusalem in the old days, what you see, the walls of Jerusalem, that was all Jerusalem. That's it, nothing else. There are small walls. When you go around there is 8 gates to Jerusalem. 8 of them, one of them is closed. Mashiach will come, it will be open. But through those, chomot, through those things, 3 years, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Roman, led by Aspicianus, cannot get in. The Gemara will tell us there was 3 most rich people in Israel that supply Jerusalem with 21 years worth of food and water and oil and flour. And that the Gemara will tell us there was 3 of them, and the Gemara will say who their name and why. One of them was Nakdimon ben Gurion. His name was Nakdimon ben Gurion. His real Hebrew name was not Nakdimon. Why they called him Nakdimon? Because he was the one that could stop the sun from going to sunset. Just like Yoshua bin Nun. Yoshua bin Nun, also when he was fighting in Gibeon, he asked Hashem to stop the sun before Shabbat so he can finish the war before Friday night. The sun stopped. This guy, Nakdimon, obviously was a big tzaddik to be able to have the sun stop as well. By the way, his real name was Boni. Boni was a builder, so to speak. But he was such a tzaddik that he had a bet. The Gemara will tell us that in מעשה שפעם אחת כשעלו לארץ ישראל לא היה להם מים לשתות. You know, when the people of Israel came back, many people to walk back to Israel, they didn't have any water. So Nagdimon went to the richest guy in that city and says, can you give me 12 wells so I can give people water? And he says, I will pay you before sunset. The guy says, what do you mean before? I don't see any rain. How are you going to pay me? But go ahead, you'll pay me a lot more than what you need to pay me. And he says, I will give you 12 kikar kesef. I will give you basically kikar is like a loaf of bread that's, pure silver. Avraham Avinu is the same silver that was used to buy the 400 silver kesef over la socher. Imagine Avraham bought Me'arat HaMachpelah in that field, in today's money, $400 million. That's what it's worth back then. Kam Nagdimon Ben Gurion is the good Ben Gurion, not like Ben Gurion we had. And he says, I will give you 12 of those kind of treasure silver for these 12 wells so I can give water to the people of Israel. He says, go ahead, I'll give it to you. And he says to him, I will pay you in that certain date before sunset. They agree on a date. And he comes, and this minister that sold him the wells, he says, listen, the wells are filled, but they filled up, and I don't see the sun. You said when the sunset, before sunset. And it was already after sunset. Nagdimon prayed to Hashem and asked him to bring back the sun and remove the clouds so he could see the sun that they're filled. And that's exactly what happened. He was so rich. This is Nagdimon because he was giving a third of what the people of Israel need in Yerushalayim for the Kohanim, for the Levites, for everybody. Because when this whole thing will happen soon, it would be on Pesach. And there was almost 12 million people there that came for Aliyah la Regel. Imagine having enough food for millions of Jews and for the Mishkan, for the Mikdash, the Kohanim, the Levites, everybody that comes. The second one, his name was the son of Kalba Savua. Kalba Savua, we know, it was the Choten Rabbi Akiva. The real name is not Kalba Savua. His real name is Yoshua Bar Kufsana. That's his real name. Kalba Savua means that every person that was hungry as a dog will come and eat in his house. He had a Bet Tamchui. He had a hallway that always had food for people to come and eat free. He says you come hungry like a dog, you live hungry, full like a dog. And the son was the second one named Ben Kalba Savua. He was the son of Kalba Savua. And the third one is called Ben Tzitzit HaKeset. What's Ben Tzitzit HaKeset? He said the guy was rich, his tzitziot never touched the ground. He was always be lifted on a chair. He was so rich. Some say he was so rich, he had like an honor chair with the head of rooms every time he goes. He was the wealthiest Jew. Like imagine you have, somebody like a good Jew, like, what's his name from Las Vegas? The owner of the Venetian that support Israel. His name skips me. Anyway, he's a very, very, huh? No. He's a very, very wealthy Jew. I can't believe his name skips me. But he does the taglit. He sends thousands and thousands of Jewish kids from all over the world to Israel. He pays for everything. He pays for many military and everything. He pays for so many things. He owns the Venetian and, everything in Vegas. The Sands. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Will come to me.
Sands is gone.
Yeah, you can Google it. But anyway, this kind of rich guy, he said that even when he walked on the street, there was always a red carpet in front of him. He would never step on the dirt. That's how rich he was. And they said these are the one that was supply every Jewish person there for 21 years. So now Aspasianus is around the city, cannot break in. And those three, as we said, they used to give the wine, they used to give the, what we call the bread, the chitim, and the wood. You know, the burning, because, you know, everything has to be cooked. But at the same time, there were gangsters in Yerushalayim. The Gemara says there was biryonim, there was those what we call gangsters, so to speak. Sheldon Adelson, thank you. The rich Jewish guy, Sheldon Adelson, and his wife, Dr. Miriam, what's her name? And they always do so much good for Israel. Baruch Hashem. They're the good Jews, unlike Soros and all the other crazy, stupid, mean, and horrific Jews that want. Miriam, Dr. Miriam, I was right. Anyway, so now there was those three horrific gangsters that came and destroy all this wealth of this food and wine and woods inside the Chomot. And basically now everybody's starving. Remember, this is again Jews hurting Jews. They said now they're in a place what we call Bena Patish La Sadan. You know, the people of Israel now are caught between a place and the hard rock, right? They says they have no food inside the walls, no korbanot, and they have the enemy outside ready to kill them. Aspasianus and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And he says, let's do this. He came to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The Gemara will mention another lady quickly named Martha bat Baitus. Martha bat Baitus was also a very, very rich woman that had so much money but no food. You know, you can have all the money, but you can have access to food. What are you going to eat? Your money, right? She sends her servant to buy wheat. The servant goes back and forth 5 times. There's nothing left. Instead of just buying her something that is, says, you know, the wheat is not so white. It's a little dirty. She goes, okay, buy it. He goes back. There's no more dirty wheat. There's only barley. She goes, no, okay, go buy the barley. It goes back and forth like a retarded, stupid kind of guy that, you know, servant that should have buy something so you have some food. What are you going to do with all the money? At the end, she comes out starving. She steps on one thing. The Gemara says it was a fig that Rabbi Tzadok was fasting for 40 years. He was so skinny, so you could see the food. When you take anything, come down, you could see clear. The skin was almost clear. He was so skinny, but it was a tzaddik gadol. And he was used to, in order to maintain his life, he used to chew on fig and throw them. Take all the juice. And because he was so sick, this lady stepped on it barefoot and died from the zihum, from this amazing chaz v'chalila dirt in Yerushalayim. So now they came to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. You know, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was the head of the Sanhedrin now. And they say he was such a tzaddik that when he was learning Torah, birds fly above his head and burn. Imagine. He's like the Mizbeach of Beit HaMikdash. You know, on the Mizbeach of HaMikdash there was a fire pillar in the day, and you know, that would burn all the sacrifice, no matter how much wind and rain, nothing. Would not move, would not be, you know, extinguished, nothing. That was like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a human. Has this kind of fire above his head that anything passes it, burn. They come to him and they said, listen, we have no other choice. We have to go meet with the Caesar. This is not coming to a good halt here. So they come to him And they advise him, he says to him, we want you to pretend that you're dying. Okay, we're going to put you in a casket. And we're going to put something very smelly, very stinky in your casket. So when you want to leave the town, these biryonim, these gangsters, will let you through. Because you say, you cannot bury inside Jerusalem. You have to bury outside of the Chomot. It's a big tzaddik, is the leader. They will let you. The advisor was named Abba Sikra. And he says to him, when we get to the gate, you have to pretend that you're dead. I know those, I see them all the time. They check everything that goes out of town to see if they can take it. They're thieves, they're gangster, biryonim. He says, Achzek atzmecha, first be like sick in your home, but when we take you out, you're like dead. We're going to put something rotten in your coffin, and we're going to take you out in order to bury you. But the checkpoint of those biryonim, so to speak, you have to pretend that you're dead. כך עשה רבי יוחנן בן זכאי, עשה כפי עצה זו, and they started to lead him into the gate to take him out. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan wants to meet the new Caesar. He's trying to work out a deal. Many times, they worked out deals instead of destruction. They say, okay, we'll do this, you'll do that. It's politics. So they get to the gate, and this Biryoni wanted to stop the body to make sure he's dead. So Abba Sakira says to them, are you crazy? What are they going to say about you Jewish stabbing a head of Sanhedrin that's dead already? Are you crazy? They'll kill you for that. Maybe now you're strong, but you'll not be strong forever. So they said, let us push him, make sure he's dead. He says, again, are you crazy? This is the head of Sanhedrin. What is wrong with you? Kibud Hamet. You have to respect the dead person. You're not even to open and look at him. So they let him through. פתחו לבבא, פתחו הבריונים את השער, עבורו. And he says here, he came to meet with the Caesar. He went to the tent of Aspicianus. By the way, this is the same Aspicianus that will kill Rabbi Akiva and the other 9 righteous people. And we'll learn about him a little bit more in a minute. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai goes to the Caesar Aspicianus. And as he sees him, he says, Shalom alecha, Melech Aspicianus. How are you, the king, and peace with you, the king Aspicianus, the Caesar, the king. Aspicianus, look at him, he says, now you have to pay for your 2 sins and for another thing. You have to die, basically. He says, why? He said, first, you didn't come to negotiate with me. I've been waiting here for 3 years. So Rabbi Yochanan says, listen, I want to, but this gangs inside would not let me out. It's called the Biryonim. He explained to him the whole town is afraid of them and him, both. They're under siege inside and outside. He says, okay, for now, you're also making fun of me. You call me the king. You said to me, Mishte Sibot, you're going to be punishing me. 1, because you said to me, they love Malka Ana. I'm not a king. How can you call me a king? You're insulting the king of Rome, so to speak. And you call me the king. What's going on here? I'm not a king. Ani lo melech, ve'ata melagleg. You're making fun of me. He says to him, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he says, actually, you will be a king. I have a prophecy, and I'll explain to you in a minute that you'll be the king. He says, Zibra Malka Ata, you will be the king. Be'emet, you are going to be the king, I'm telling you. He says, how do you know? He says, Hashem says to us, He will never let anybody but a king destroy Yerushalayim. It says, La mimsara Yerushalayim beyadecha. He says to him that HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the book of Isaiah, chapter 10, he says, only a king can destroy Yerushalayim. Vehaya, what we call adiro mimeno. It says only adir means a king. Only a king can destroy Jerusalem. We know that happens before. Nebuchadnezzar was not a servant, was not a minister. He was a king, king of Babel. So now, he says to him, you will see that it says, Ve'adir mimenu Levanon, that's his Bet HaMikdash, shene'emar, Ahar HaTov Hazeh, this is Har HaBayit. You'll be able to destroy Temple Mount and the Mikdash. He says, but I'm not a king. Yes.
Something's missing here.
What's
He
missing?
doesn't want him to destroy it, therefore the prophecy...
Hey, this is a negotiation. This is negotiation. Remember, this is politics. You have to, when you come to ask for, a favor from a politician, usually you give them compliments before you start negotiating, right? If you come to anybody in power and says, can you give me this? He looks at the witness. But he says, oh, Your Honor, you're amazing. I heard of all the amazing things you do. People talk about you here. They love you. The voters always, tell, what a great guy to have in the White House and this and that. You give them compliment, then you ask. It's more likely you receive.
I meant technically.
Forget technically now. This is life and death. There's no technicality here. There is Aspasianus coming to destroy Jerusalem. The head of the Sanhedrin meets him and trying to avoid this. Okay? And he says to him, you'll be the king. Why? Hashem revealed to him in Ruach HaKodesh that he will be a king.
Who destroys Jerusalem?
1 second, we'll get to it. So it says to him, it's also in Yirmiyahu, it's mentioned that only a king can destroy Jerusalem. He's asking him again. Aspasianus asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, said, but why didn't you come to me for 3 years? I don't understand if you think I'm the king. He said, well, I told you, there's a gang, it's a biryonim, I cannot get out. And then Aspasianus give him a mashal. He says a parable. It says, if there was a barrel of honey, a barrel filled with honey, but there is a snake, darkon, the Gemara called darkon is not dragon, like the English they use it. Dragon in English come from the word drakon in the Gemara. It's actually a snake, big snake, that's surrounding this chavit of dvash, this barrel of honey. He says to him, in order to get the honey, you have to do 2 things. Most likely, you have to kill the snake and break the barrel. Right? This is what happened with us here. We have you on the outside, and we have the barrel, those in the chomot that's surrounding us on the inside, and we have the biryonim. Yes, we're the honey, but it's very hard to get to us. You have to go through all of it. It says exactly that is the case. So now they're agreeing that, okay, you have a good reason not to come in to see me. He says, Aspasianus now is talking, and all of a sudden there is a running coming from Rome, and says to her, a shaliach, they come from Rome, a messenger says, Kum, stand up, you are just became the King Caesar. You are now the actual king of Rome. You are the number 1 Caesar. And he says, this came from the decision of all these noblemen and the Senate of Rome. You are the new king. Rabbi Yochanan, before that, says to him, you'll see that when they announce to you that you're a king, your shoes will be too small for you. He looks at him and says, what do you mean too small? He says, when a person is proud, their feet grows instantly. Like your heart, when all of a sudden your chest is filled up. When it comes to becoming a king, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan knew the secret that your feet will not fit the shoes that you have currently. It will grow almost by size to 2 sizes instantly. It's amazing knowledge. Aspasianus is washing himself, and he's about to put his shoes in, it doesn't fit. He looks at Rabbi Yochanan, says, wow. He says, listen, this is what I told you, you will be the king. He says, okay, now I'm the king and I have only one shoe. What about the other shoe? What should I do? He says to him, if you look at somebody you hate, your shoe will come back to its size. Your feet, to fit your shoe, I'm sorry. And so they brought him some very ugly soldiers. He looked at him, he said, ugh, and his shoes went back. He could fit into his shoe. And he says to him, you see, now that you told me the truth, Aspasianu said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'm giving you 2 wishes. What do you want? You can negotiate now. You are smart. You spoke the truth. I understand why you didn't come see me for 3 years. I understand that you're really a man of God. Because what you said to me now, we never knew. The Romans were very smart. You know, it's not for nothing they'll rule the world. You cannot be stupid and rule the world. Right? You can put a stupid ruler for 8 years, but not the whole world, or for many years. It says here, what do you want? It says, B'chokhmato, Darash Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, things that he can maintain and achieve. He says to him, what do you want? He says, I want you to give me the city of Yavne, make it the holy city for us so I can move all my Sanhedrin there. And I want you to take care of Rabbi Tzadok. As he was very sick, I want you to put the best doctors on him so he can cure him. And I want you to take care of the mishpacha of Rabban Gamliel. You know, Rabban Gamliel, who is Rabban Gamliel came from? Do you know? Rabban Gamliel is actually from Ruth the Moabite. And from him, as we know, continue from David, Shlomo, Mashiach ben David, from the same Shulsholet, from the same family. He wanted to secure the days of Mashiach. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, please, do me those 3 things. And he says, please, I want you to do that. Our Gemara will ask, how come Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did not ask him, don't destroy the temple? Very valid question, no? Why? If the Caesar, the king, the new king says, okay, now you can make a wish. You know your city is about to be destroyed. He said, don't destroy my city. This is the temple. Rabbi Yochanan already knew that it was from Shamayim, that it has to be destroyed. What happened with Bar Kamtza there should have never ever happened. What happened with thousands rabbi being greedy and siding with a horrific person because he has money versus Hashem. That's the fall and rise of many, many, many rabbis, right? They rise and fall. They think they're above God. They make a lot of money. We know rabbis that make $500,000 when the whole budget is less than $1 million. It's crazy. And then they cry, we have no money for the community. Or you see rabbis that steals, asking for donation and get it and never bring anything, do anything. And they keep asking. This is exactly what happened here. The rich guy controlled all these rabbis. And these rabbis could not control him. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I'd rather save the Torah and the future of the people of Israel with Yavne and the Tzaddikim than save a building that's made out of stone and wood that'll be destroyed anyway. If it's not now, okay, later. And he was right. It wasn't that moment. It happened later. With Titus. And as we mentioned, they said that when things started after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received his wishes, the people of Aspasianus killed 1.2 million Jews in Jerusalem. They slaughtered them. They said that the blood would not sip for 3 years. They're the whole beginning of the chaos from Beitar, Rabbi, Akiva and Bar Kokhba, the destruction of Judea and Samaria, the destruction of the temple, all the way to Titus. This is all from Bar Kamtza and on forth. It says here that the blood was so immense and the killing was so immense, and this whole thing happened on one of the Shalosh Regalim that happened on Pesach. When million comes to sacrifice, many of them did not know what's happening in Yerushalayim. Very few people knew of this story inside the walls. Imagine, we're sitting outside of the walls in Yerushalayim, let alone if we sit, anywhere in Israel, in Tzfat or Chatzor or Tel Aviv or Rehovot or Eilat. We don't know what's going on. Now we have media, and back then there was not like, instant. It was Ruach HaKodesh. Only tzaddikim knew what's happening. Ruach HaKodesh is what's the WhatsApp today, in a sense of knowledge, right? Today you send something in WhatsApp all over the world in a second. This is really Hashem delivering everything between us. We are what we call a Charita Yamim now. This is the last generation before Mashiach. Why? Because we have the most knowledge in every generation as far as knowledge concerned. Dor De'ah. We have, imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a different set of tablets. There's a different set of iClouds, different set of WhatsApp, different set of videos in YouTube. Everything that we have today, they have it, but in a much higher level. What we have today is just a de'ah. It's one level of knowledge. You had the Oracle, right? Oracle. What's Oracle? Today is a software, but back then, it was the speaking of God and the light of God. When Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the iPad of the time, the ephod, the Urim and Tumim, it spoke back to him like a computer does, but in a much, much, much higher level. We see that everything that happened after the story of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, it says the Gemara continue now and bring the story after Aspasianus left and came Titus. As we know, as we mentioned, Titus was the nephew. Right? Onkelos was his nephew of Titus. And he came, and as we know, he says, Titus HaRasha came to destroy Yerushalayim, ve'amar I Elohamo tzur chasio bo. He says this Rasha, Titus HaRasha, shechiref ve'gitef klape ma'ala, he actually was one of the kings that had such Sinat Hashem. He hated God so much that he would take a hooker and he would go into the Mikdash and put the Torah like it was sheets on the floor and have sex with the hooker on that in Beit HaMikdash, in front of the Kodesh HaKodesh.
Where does he reside now?
In a minute we'll get to it. He said when he cut the parochet with his sword, the Gemara says blood came from the parochet. Imagine I take the Aron HaKodesh, I cut this material, bad, right? Bad. By the way, what's beged? Beged, how do you make beged? Clothes you make out of bad, right? What's bad? How do you make clothes from? The material that you make the clothes called bad, right? Cotton or whatever the case may be. What it came from? Adam HaRishon, it starts with the letter Aleph. Right? Adam, Aleph, Elohim and Dam, right? He betrayed Hashem. Originally, he had no clothes on. He was naked, looks like an angel from the heaven, a fire guy, electrician at the highest level, lights up the whole world. He does something, he betrays Hashem. He eat from the tree of knowledge. Hashem says, don't do it from. הקדוש ברוך הוא העניש אותו בשלוש האותיות הבאות אחרי א'. God punished him with the 3 letters that come after the letter Aleph. What's come after Aleph? 3 letters. Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Beged. He dressed him up with the clothes. Now he made him skin from skin, not from light. He took the aleph and put ayn. He says, you're blind now. Iver, or is iver. Now imagine, today, I cut this bed, this bud, this beged of, the parochet, the covering, is made like a clothes. I cut it and blood start coming out. It's exactly what happened with Titus. He says he was such a horrific king that he destroyed and killed so many and never buried them for 7 years. There was a miracle in Beitar, for an example. The body was so much, millions, they made fence around cities with bodies, and the bodies will not rotten for 7 years. It was a miracle. And the word Beitar in Hebrew means levater, to cut off. He was cutting people in halves. It was horrific brutality. And he says that he was desecrating the temple in a way that everybody even thought of doing. When, for an example, when Nebuchadnezzar did that, he just destroyed, took the stuff out and left. Did not start doing horrific things. Same thing with the Greeks. 213 years into the second temple, with the 6 Antiochus, they came and really broke everything and poured the oil, right? They didn't want to have kosher oil for the menorah. They burnt. They did not do what the Titus did. Come Titus, he does things that nobody ever seen in their lifetime. And after he destroyed Jerusalem, he went back to Rome in his boat. To go from Israel to Rome, to Italy, it's a lot easier to go by sea, the Mediterranean, versus going through Turkey and all the way, surrounding all the way to Italy. The Gemara says that he was going in his boat and all of a sudden, a giant wave, Nachshol, the Gemara says, is what we call today, when you go to certain places around the world, there's wave that's like 100, 300 feet tall. Nachshol comes and about to just fall over his boat and drown them all. Amar, he talks to Hashem. He says, excuse me, Hashem, כמדומני אני שאלוהים של אלו אין גבורתו במים. I thought you much stronger. I saw what you did to Pharaoh and Yam Suf. Really? Okay, you have power in the water, but why don't you fight me on land? Are you listening, Yaakov? This is your question. He says to him, you use Sisera, when it comes to Cicero, you destroy his military in Nachal Kishon. You drown them in water too. Okay, you're the god of water. You're very, very powerful when it comes to water. You want to drown me as well? If you think you're so strong, God of the Jewish people, come fight me on land. Manu armanu, he says to him. רק אני ואתה, בוא נילחם ביבשה. This Titus had such chutzpah that the Shekhinah came out that moment and said, Bat Kol Yatza, the Gemara says, Rasha ben Rasha. You are a wicked and the son of a wicked. Ben Beno shel Esav Rasha. You are from Esav. I was wicked. Esav is Edom. Edom, what's Edom? Is Esav, right? When Esav says, give me from the Adom Azeh. I want to have my world in this Edom and this Edom, meaning the Greeks and the Romans, right? We have Galut Yavan and Galut Edom, the two exiles. And as we know, every flag except I think 4 of them in the entire European and Christian world have red in it. אדום. כל הדגלים של הנצרות יש בהם צבע אדום של עשיו, אדום. עשיו lived on blood. He came out bloody. He was a redhead with teeth ready to kill. They said he was biting animals with his own mouth to kill them. He says to him, Bat Kol Yatza, and says to this wicked Titus, Rasha ben Beno shel Rasha, Esav. He said, I tell you what, I'm going to have, Hashem says to him, Bat Kol, by the way, is the voice of Shekhinah. She says to him, this voice comes to him and says, I created one very small creation. Okay? It's the easiest creation I ever created in the world. It's called Yatush. You know what's Yatush? But it's a very certain kind of mosquito. There's all kinds of mosquitoes. There's one mosquito, is the only animal in the world that only takes in, never have out, doesn't go poop. Only intake, no outtake. It says, I tell you what, I want you to fight this little mosquito. Forget fighting Hashem. Fight this. If you win this little tiny mosquito, I'll give you whatever you want. It says, Beriya kala li yesh be'olami ve'yatush shema. It's very interesting, the word yatush, we'll get to it in a minute. It says, why they call it Beriya kala? Why they call it such an easy creation? It says, because, this one only have intake, no outtake. Usually to have an outtake, you have a whole system in place to digest and this and that, to take out the clean, leave it in the body and take out the bad and have it goes outside. It's a whole system that this animal did not have, this creation. She says to him, Bat Kol, now get to land and you start your war with this little tiny Yatush. The moment he put his foot on earth, so to speak, on the land, off the boat, come this little mosquito, enter his nose, all the way went to his brain. Now, this Yatush, this mosquito, stayed in his brain for 7 years, the Gemara says. Baha Yatush v'nichnas b'chotamo v'nikir b'mocho 7 shanim. Yam achad ahave ka afli ababa devahe nafcha. One day, remember, 7 years, this thing digging in his brain. Needless to say, it's not a comfortable thing to do. Hashem has very interesting punishment when it comes to certain years. The 7 years, right? We have the 7 years of famine, right? We have many sevens in the Torah. There's 49 sevens in the Torah, including the good sevens, right? But when it comes to the bad 7, Elohim Yishmor. It says here that one day he was walking by a place that making metal, napach. Napach is a person that deal with iron, that makes swords or make whatever, anything from metal. And they always use parzela. Parzela is a hammer, patish, And when he walked by this, all of a sudden, this mosquito stopped hammering in his brain. Because he hears everything, that's going in his brain. And he's feeling horrific, of course, needless to say, he's not healthy. But the moment he passed by this, the mosquito stopped. He heard the hammer, so he sees, he doesn't hear the mosquito. He says, from now on, I want you to bring me a person like this to sit in my palace and hit the hammer every day so this mosquito stop. But like any other things, the mosquito got used to the noise and started his job again. It's very interesting how you can get used to things. My dear wife's parents owned a trash company in the old days. To own a trash company is a very lucrative business, so to speak. But in the old days, it wasn't. Today, it became such like crazy. Back then, they used to go and pick up the trash themselves. They had a truck, 2 guys picking up the trash. They smell everything. They have to stand outside of the trash can. Is that what today you have machine, automation, everything is recycled, everything like this. Right? It was very humbling job. Yes?
We thought you said trust.
Trash.
No, we thought you said trust.
No, listen, I'm telling you how your body can get used to anything. So I used to ask him, how, Jonathan, how do you have this kind of sense of smell? He says, believe me, after 1 week, you don't smell it anymore. And it's true. Right? We get used to things when you just give it a little bit of time. No matter how bad it is. this mosquito got used to the noise. Said, okay, and I can do my work now. Okay, I got the noise. Keep digging and digging and digging. The Gemara continue. It says that Titus got to a place where he had to kill himself from the pain and from the agony. And he says, Tanya, the Gemara says in the Braita, Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Aruva, Ani haiti ben gdolei Romi. I was one of the biggest Jewish people in Rome. I was advisors to Rome, kingship. And when Titus died, his head was open, and we saw this yatush that the Bat Kos says, this tiny mosquito, it was the size of a bird. It became inside, because it doesn't have outtake, only intake. It grew in his brain, and it became from something he can barely see to the size of a bird. Dror, the Gemara says. And it says it was the weight of Shnei Slaim. It was like almost, imagine, half a pound. Mosquito in your brain. Continue the Gemara, and he goes to the story of Onkelos. And we'll finish with that. You know, we mentioned Onkelos. He was the nephew of Titus. And when Titus, before he had this disease of this mosquito, he asked him, the Gemara says, Onkelos, the son of Kulnikus, his father named Kulnikus, and he was the nephew of Titus, as we mentioned. He came to him and he says, listen, I want to convert. And Titus, now, this is, but in the beginning, he says, don't do it. Right? Remember, originally he asked him, he says, don't. So he now, because Onkelos converted and was such a tzaddik now, he knew how to do science, you know, seance. How do you say that in English? When you bring the dead back? Seance, thank you. In Hebrew, close. Ov, in Hebrew, the Gemara call it ov. You're not allowed to do it, just so you know. It's very dangerous because you can really bring neshamot. There's many stories in Israel of things like that happen. So he did an ov, and he brought the neshama of Titus. And he asked him, tell me, what is going on with you right now? Titus said to him, you know, before I died, I asked them, because of this mosquito, I asked them to cremate me, burn me, and scatter my ashes all over the 7 seas. And today, what they do to me every day, they put me together, gather my ashes, make me a person, and burn me in hell, and back and forth, and every day like this, for the rest of the eternity.
It's too good.
And then, he says to him, so what do you think now? Who's the most important things in the world? Titus says, Israel. Now I know, I didn't know that before. Remember, this is Onkelos asking the spirit of his cousin, uncle. He says to him, Mahu ledbuki abihu. He says, is that a good nation to stick with? Because you convert already. You know, many people convert and then they leave. Chaz v'chalila. To convert is not just to convert. You have to be Jewish. Not Jewish, you have to be a Jew. You have to keep all the mitzvot. Just because you converted doesn't mean you're Jewish. Many people, many people, Jewish people think they're Jewish because they were born Jews. It's not true. Hashem says, if you don't keep Shabbat, you're a goy. Imagine this. There's many things in the Torah, if you read carefully, if you don't do things that Hashem tells you, you are not a Jew. Yes, one day after you pay your dues, go to hell and pay for everything you did not do here, then Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Then you might have a part after you pay your dues, not before. Come Onkelos, and he says, after you ask him, is it okay to stay Jewish? Continue, be glued to the Jews, so to speak. Milyahu nafshin velo matzile kiimena. He says their mitzvot are so immense that I don't think you can make them all. But he says, if you do that, you will be one of the leaders. Now this is Titus saying to his nephew. And then the Gemara bring another thing. The Gemara says in Eicha. We're reading today in Tisha B'Av, Eicha. What's Eicha, by the way? The word Eicha means Ayeka. Where are you? Why are you here today? Why you're not in Beit HaMikdash? Why you're not in Israel? Why you're not religious? Why you're not Orthodox? Ayeka is acronym. Elohim Yodea Kol HaNistarot. Hashem knows everything. He cannot hide. He cannot pretend. Ayeka, where are you holding now? And why you are not holding in the right place? That's what we have to ask ourselves every day, every moment, but most likely the most in Tisha B'Av. I'm going to finish with one story about Napoleon. Before we do that, we'll finish. The Gemara says that Onkelos wanted to really show the entire world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really the one. And he went beyond any convert, so to speak, that had basically zero knowledge to be the second to Torah. We hear from Onkelos. The word Onkelos is a very interesting word. Has the word en kelos. There's no end to it. You can do anything you want. There's a story about Napoleon and Rabbi Chaim from Volozhin. Napoleon, Yaakov, do you know when Napoleon was, how many years ago?
Late 1600s, right?
Napoleon, about 407 years ago, was about to go conquer Russia. And he was heading towards Russia with his soldiers, millions of them. And he goes by a small city named Volozhin, a village named Volozhin, in Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken. And he sees a lot of people sitting on the floor and crying. Napoleon sent his matzbi, sent his military head of military, says, what is going on here? Go find out why they're crying. We haven't done anything yet. We are not destroyed anything yet. We're just heading towards Russia. We didn't do anything to this village. Why are they crying? Goes the head of the military and he sees the people sitting on the floor crying, and he asks them, who's your leader? Usually leaders talk to leaders. They don't talk to simple people. But remember, we're all leaders. There's no such thing. Hashem made you in Tzelem Elokim. You can be a leader if you want to. And he says, why are you crying? Says Rabbi Chaim Volozhin says, what do you mean, why are we crying? We have our own reason. He said, we haven't done anything to you. He says, no, we're not crying because of you. We cry about our destruction that happened to us 1400 years ago. The temple was destroyed. So he went back to Napoleon and he told him, he says that it's not us. They're crying about a building that they lost, was destroyed around 1400 years. So Napoleon was so impressed with this answer, he went to meet Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. Napoleon actually started sitting down and discussing with Rabbi Chaim from Volozhin everything about Tisha B'Av. He was so impressed with his knowledge. He asked him, tell me, Rabbi, do you think I'm going to win the war with Russia? Rabbi Chaim from Volozhin, by the way, on a footnote, many of the leaders of Israel that ran Israel in the early 1900s, late, the 1901, 1910, 1920s, 1940s, 1948, their fathers went to Yeshiva Volozhin. Even from Ben Gurion, Herzl, some say Moshe Dayan, many rabbis. If you look at the history of Volozhin, was the biggest yeshiva in Europe. There was two major yeshivot, one the Sephardim in Morocco and one in Volozhin. And Napoleon asked him, I'm going to win the war with Russia. And he says, no. I urge you not to go to war with Russia. Napoleon says, what do you mean? I'm the king. I rule all over the world. I destroy so many nations. So came his military guy that's standing next to him and says, Napoleon, I'll go in. I'm bigger. Let me do the work for you. So Napoleon looks at him and says, no. You're taller. I'm bigger. I'm the ruler. You work for me. Even though you're tall, you're not bigger than I am. So he went back to Chaim Volozhin. Rabbi Volozhin says to him, why? Why wouldn't I win the war? He said, very simple. There's a rule in the Gemara, and we learn that, and that's why we're crying today. When God gives you land, it's your land. Like the land of Israel. It'll forever be the land of Israel. Whether you have occupiers and wars and this and that, we'll go back to it. You're going to Russia, you're coming in with soldiers that you hired. You're going to fight soldiers that own their land. Mother Russia, soldiers fight for their own land. Your soldiers fighting for money and meals. They don't fight for a cause. You will never win. And he gave him a parable. It's like having a carriage carried by 4 different animals from a different family, different kinds. They don't work together. They all end up going against each other. And that's exactly what happened. Napoleon lost in Russia. Tisha B'Av is a holiday, and I call it a holiday because we need to celebrate the end of what we call destruction and galut. We need to bring Mashiach. We need to have the will and the wish and the ratzon to have Hashem with us. A short story on Tisha B'Av, and we'll finish with that. I always used to say to my rabbi, you always say this and you don't finish. So he's a great rabbi. I have to imitate him a little bit. You know, when the Holocaust began, there was a yeshiva that had 700 students. And this yeshiva called the Mir Yeshiva. You heard of the Mir Yeshiva? So the rabbi of the Mir Yeshiva at the time, in the early 1940, they told him, you have to get out, leave right away. The Germans are coming to destroy and kill everybody. They're killing everybody on their path. So they went on the border, and there was a train about to take off, the transatlantic train from Europe to Russia, and then all the way to Asia. Amazingly enough, this train was empty, and it fit all the 700 students. When they get to China, they go, the rabbi looks for the head of the city, and he says, listen, we just escaped from the Holocaust. Please save us. There's a place where we can stay in Shanghai. He says, yes, come, I want to show you something. Couple hundred years ago, a Jewish family built a building here. It was supposed to be a shul, and it's empty. Go ahead, take it. Exactly, there was 700 beds in it. They went to sleep there. Now, their goal is not to be in Shanghai. Their goal is to be back in Israel, or to go to America, somewhere free where they can be saved. So I have nothing. Come Tisha B'Av, the head of the yeshiva says, I'm going to go to the American embassy to ask for visas. His head staff says to him, okay, you have to change. Go shave and dress up and put shoes on, you cannot, you look like Tisha B'Av, so to speak. The rabbi says to them, no, this is Tisha B'Av. We need to honor Hashem, not the ambassador. So please, this is 700 lives at your hands. Please change, dress up, shave, or comb, or wash, or put shoes on. You cannot go to the embassy like this. He says, no. He goes to the embassy. There is almost, they said that day, a line of 2,500 people. He prays to Hashem. He took with him the Kinot. He's reading Kinot and Eicha. And out of this 2,500 people standing in line, come all of a sudden, the guard from the door of the embassy goes through the line and says to him, come. Bring him into the ambassador. Out of 2,500 people, he dressed like God only knows. He goes in, the ambassador says, what can I do for you? He says, listen, I have a list here that I need visas. He looks like this, he cannot find the list. He lost the list. You have seconds with the ambassador. You don't have like a whole hour. There's a stamp, that's it. He says, what do you want? He says, I have 700 students. We escaped the Holocaust. I want to go to America, please, or to Israel. Help me. The ambassador take a letterhead from his drawer with few pages, sign it, approves it, empty. He said, go ahead, fill all the names. Here's your visa. 700 went back to America. One of the head yeshiva in Yerushalayim that used to be my dear friend Rabbi Nissan was one of the heads of the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, a dear, dear man. Sorry, he lost his wife last year in Gan Eden Nishmata. He started a new yeshiva to honor all those students and the fight to continue to bring more yeshivot. He opened his own yeshiva in Yerushalayim to bring more, because the Mir has such name, everybody wants to go. But he, Rabbi Nissan, had a vision. And he said something to me when I met him last time in a wedding. I have to give you the right name of his new yeshiva. I said, everybody wants to be in the Mir yeshiva. Who doesn't want to be in the Mir? There's thousands of people wants to go in. They fight over it all the time. They want to get in. And when I see that, unfortunately, we don't have enough room, nor enough teacher, not enough money. So I'm going to start a new yeshiva. And he started a new yeshiva, and now they have already a few hundred new students that could not get anywhere. And Baruch Hashem, I want to, all of you, if you have a chance, look him up, Rabbi Nissan. I'll post his website and everything with his new yeshiva that used to be one of the heads of the Mir Yeshiva of Yerushalayim, open his own to allow more Torah to the Bnei Israel. I wish all of you, Be'ezat Hashem, may this be the last fast day of Tisha B'Av, and may we all merit to go back to Israel with Mashiach, and before even. I'm Rabbi Dahan from San Diego, Kolel Avat Israel in La Jolla. This class will be posted on our website, neshatorah.org. God bless you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing online.